We're going to talk about the difference between the offshore trust and domestic trust. So let's compare if you set up a domestic trust compared to an offshore trust. What's the difference? Well, the difference is what we've seen, this case law, how the courts actually interpret the law and how these trusts have held in actual courtroom. That's the important thing. It's not just a theory that something should work, but what we really want to know is, does it really work in reality where the rubber meets the road when somebody has the legal bullets flying at their head? Does it work? And what we found is that the domestic trusts, whereas they're better than nothing, they do not have a very good track record for protecting assets. The offshore trusts do. They're very, very strong. And here's the reason why. Because the U.S. courts say, give me the money, and you have results-oriented judges where the law says this, but the judge decides, nope, we're going to do it this way. I mean, you could ask any attorney, like those on our staff, if an attorney has gone before a judge, so many times the judge rules according to their gut feeling and not necessarily the law. So in this case, we've seen many of these domestic trusts fail the case law test. And this is especially pronounced in cases where the trust is set up in a jurisdiction that does recognize asset protection law, such as Nevada, and the client is in a state that doesn't recognize asset protection law, such as California, New York, Florida, Texas, or any other state that doesn't have asset protection trust law. The judge says, okay, you're here, the assets are here, I'm going to seize them. And what they can do, because the U.S. courts have jurisdiction over U.S. people, and they say, okay, Nevada trustee, I order you to turn over the assets or I'm going to hold you in contempt. And when it comes to the trustee giving up, his or her own assets or yours, or going to jail, heaven forbid, you know what that answer is going to be. And so that's the weakness inherent in the domestic trust, because we've seen them penetrated regularly. And in fact, I've never once seen it work where the trust was in one state and the client was in a state that doesn't have asset protection law. I've never seen it work once. So the domestic trusts are better than nothing. It's like a speed bump on the road. It just doesn't provide the strong asset protection when the rubber meets the road. Now, let's talk about the Cook Islands Trust as an example. I can say that because I've set up more Cook Islands Trust than anybody in the world. It's the best jurisdiction. They've been in the asset protection since 1991. So as of this video, about 33 years ago. And so we've been setting up trusts there for about 30 years. And so what we found is when the U.S. courts say, give me the money, or you have a results-oriented judge that says, well, I'm going to seize the assets, what we found in case law is that U.S. courts don't have jurisdiction over that trustee. So we have that trustee step in and assume their protective role when the client's under legal attack, and the assets are protected. They're safe. And if you look at that case law, we've never had a client lose money. The trust established that we've done, the clients followed our instructions and put the funds in an international bank account. If people are confused or they don't have much international experience, international sounds scary to them just because they're not familiar with it. Lack of familiarity sometimes triggers fear in people. So the key thing is maybe somebody thinks, U.S. or wherever you're from, if you're from UK, Australia, New Zealand, or wherever, is safe. Anything outside of our borders is not safe. Well, fact is, that doesn't meet reality. You got to look at the data. And the data shows, if you look up the safest banks in the world are not in the U.S. They're not in Australia, the UK. They're in places like Switzerland. There are also really good safe banks in Canada and Germany, but the problem is they recognize foreign judgments, whereas the banks that we established in Switzerland for our clients, in Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, and sometimes we'll go with one of the Caribbean jurisdictions or Belize jurisdictions or Cook Islands Bank itself, they don't recognize foreign judgments. They don't allow the funds to be seized, whereas in Canada, Germany, they do. So it's a combination of using the trust in the right jurisdiction and having the bank in the right jurisdiction. And look it up for yourself. World's 50 safest banks. As of this video, there's only one that's in the U.S. Just one. And it's not even a major bank. It's a teeny-tiny farming bank. It's the safest bank in the U.S. I mean, that's just embarrassing. So the safest banks are not in the U.S. The safest banks are outside the U.S. And if you look up the data, Google that for yourself, you'll see. Yeah, the Global Finance publishes a report of the world's safest banks every year. And you'll see that the safest banks are not U.S.-based. They're foreign. Only the U.S. safe because there's FDIC. After all, it's backed by the most in-debt country in the world. So it must be safe, right? No. No, there are provisions in place in Switzerland that make the funds even safer. You can see even with the bank where it was Credit Suisse, they had the debacle because they were helping U.S. people evade taxes, and they got pretty much fined out of existence. Immediately, the Swiss government took over, and that bank was secured by another stronger bank. So the key thing is you've got to know the right jurisdiction, you need to know the case law, and you need to take advantage of the tools where your money is safest and you get the best protection.